Hey everybody, this is Joe Santarevers Photos. I wanted to bring something different to y'all today. I do a lot of book reading. I'm going to continue doing that, but I also want to kind of dig into the past. Remember when this show came on?
And who spent millions of dollars buying his records, seeing his movies. 2 days ago, the news came from Nashville of a charge against Elvis Presley's personal physician, accused by the Tennessee State Board of Medical Examiners of indiscriminately prescribing uppers, downers, and pain-killing drugs that Elvis Presley consumed in large quantities. For months, Geraldo Rivera has been investigating this story, and because of its startling nature, we're devoting our entire hour tonight to Geraldo Rivera's special 2020 report on the man known as the King of Rock and Roll. Geraldo.
Thank you, the king he was. Elvis Presley was a giant on America's cultural landscape, a man filled with passion and fire at a time when most of the rest of the country was sleepwalking through its cultural life. He didn't invent rock and roll, he just hand-carried it into the mainstream. Elvis Presley was different, and because he was good at it, it paid off. All 28 of his movies were moneymakers, and his records have sold somewhere between 700 and 800 million copies. That works out to roughly one Elvis Presley record for each family on the face of the earth. Despite the fact that hundreds of thousands of people worshipped him, the king demonstrated the fact of his mortality when he died at the age of 42. They told us of a heart attack. But did Elvis Presley really die of a heart attack? That's what this special edition of 2020 is all about.
The police came out and they filmed the show, so I couldn't move. I had to stand still.
The working-class hero, the hillbilly cat, was dead. And 2 years later, hundreds of thousands still mourn his passing. Sensitive, sensual, generous, talented, he had been living proof that the rags-to-riches American dream could still come true. Since his death, that memory has been tainted slightly by a smoldering controversy. Did Elvis really die of a heart attack, or was he just another victim of self-destructive overindulgence?
I don't think he had a heart attack. That's what I'd like to believe, that he died from a heart attack.
I know he had a hard life. It would make no difference.
Everybody should be told the truth.
I've been thinking about that. I hope and pray that he didn't do it on purpose.
We know that at the time of his death, Elvis was no longer the slim, swivel-hip sex symbol he once was. As this videotape of his last concert clearly shows, by June of '77, 2 months before he died, Elvis seemed strained and swollen.
So what do you think so far? I mean, obviously, we all know nowadays, in 2025, that there was a lot of people trying to protect the brand of Elvis, less than protect the legacy of Elvis, in my opinion. Maybe there was some of that as well. But you know, Colonel Parker, he obviously, put a lot of pressure on people that were in the medical offices, the media, to keep quiet the reality of what happened to Elvis, which unfortunately was a lot of health issues, it was a lot of depression, it was a lot of thinking that he could trust doctors, and then of course becoming overwhelmed with people turning their backs on him, like Red West, Sonny West, Dave Hebler, Priscilla for sure. Very sad. Shows like this make me sad, but at the same time, I usually pick up a tidbit of information I didn't remember before I got dry skin. Sorry about that. I'm on my way to a golf tournament, but I wanted to kind of put out a second video for you today. So let's continue watching, and let's continue seeing what else there is that maybe we've learned, or about people around Elvis and the media in general.
Snuffer. After Elvis died, were you told what he had died from?
Well, all of us had heard at the same time that it was a heart attack.
Do you believe in your own mind right now that that alone caused his death?
Right. In the very beginning, I did. I just, I think it was Elvis's time to go. So I think he took him. But then again, in my mind, there are a lot of unanswered questions.
Our investigation of the death begins with a reconstruction of the last 12 hours of Elvis Presley's life. Like many people in show business, he and his entourage were night owls. Their days began after dark. About an hour before midnight on the night before he died, Elvis had a dentist appointment with a dentist named Lester Hoffman. Accompanied by his fiancée Ginger Alden, his cousin Billy Smith, and longtime friend Charlie Hodge, Elvis drove out of Graceland, his famous home in Memphis, Tennessee. The next day, August 16th, was the scheduled beginning of another concert tour, and Elvis wanted to get his teeth cleaned and 2 fillings replaced before he went out on the road.
We returned back to Graceland at about 1:30, and Elvis and I went upstairs, and Elvis turned on the television in his room to relax for a little while. Then Elvis started talking about his tour and started talking about our wedding plans and about announcing our engagement at his Memphis concert. Then it was about 4 o'clock, and I asked Elvis if he still wanted to play racquetball, which he had mentioned playing earlier, and he said yes. Elvis got in touch with Billy Smith, and Billy and his wife Jo came up at about 4:30. We went down to play racquetball. So Elvis really seemed like he was in a good mood. He played racquetball for a little while and then went and played the piano. It was about 6 o'clock when we went back into Graceland. At about 6:30, Elvis called downstairs for Ricky Stanley to bring up his packet of medication to help him get to sleep, because he was so nervous about, he was always kind of keyed up before starting a tour. So Ricky brought it up. Elvis took his packet of medication and started reading a book on psychic energy then. He thought that would help him fall asleep. Then I fell asleep. So at about 8 o'clock, I woke up because Elvis was restless, saying that he just couldn't sleep. So he called downstairs for Ricky again, and Ricky came up and brought up another packet of medication.
A second packet.
Right. Elvis took that, and then I went back to sleep. The third time I was awakened again, Elvis was starting to get up, saying that he still couldn't sleep. He took the book on psychic energy with him, and he started toward the bathroom door. And I said, "No, don't fall asleep." And he turned and smiled at me and said, "Oh, okay, I won't." And then he went to the bathroom. I went back to sleep, and I slept until 2 o'clock. At that time, I rolled over and I looked at the clock, and it said 2 o'clock then, and the bathroom door was still shut. So at that time, I went in and I knocked on the door, and no one answered. So I opened the door, and that was when I saw Elvis.
According to an investigator for the medical examiner's office, the body was purple or deep blue, and rigor mortis had already set in. Elvis had apparently been dead since early that morning. After a flurry of desperate activity, which may have included attempts at mouth-to-mouth resuscitation by members of the Presley staff, an ambulance arrived at Graceland. 2 paramedics from the Memphis Fire Department, Ulysses Jones and Charles Crosby, needed assistance from several of the aides even to lift Elvis onto their stretcher. He weighed between 250 and 255 pounds. The body was rushed to the Baptist Memorial Hospital, where an emergency resuscitation team, similar to the one shown here, worked in vain to revive Elvis. In a very short time, it became apparent the effort was useless. Even at that time, the authorities at least suspected that the death might be drug-related.
So tell me, where were you? Where were you when Elvis passed away? What did you think immediately? Did you know, do you think that it had to be something substance related? Because or did we think that it was health? Because I mean, I was 2 years old in '77. Some of y'all were 18, some of you were 25, some of you were 15, some of you were 30. So let me know, I mean, real quick, and then continue watching this video, because obviously that's what was put out.
Orlick, the investigator from the medical examiner's office, received the news of the death from the police. The message to him read, EPOD DOA BMH. Elvis Presley, overdose ? Dead on arrival, Baptist Memorial Hospital. At about 3:30 in the afternoon Central Time, on August 16, 1977, Elvis Aaron Presley, age 42, was officially pronounced dead. It was the lead story on the evening's news broadcasts.
It may have been a heart attack, but police in Memphis, Tennessee are also investigating the possibility that Elvis Presley's death this afternoon was caused by a drug overdose. Presley was found unconscious in his mansion at about 2:30, was pronounced dead an hour later.
Since the crowds had already begun gathering outside Baptist Hospital, the doctors decided to perform the autopsy there, rather than risk transporting the body to the morgue in the city hospital across the street. The autopsy was performed by approximately 8 doctors on the staff of Baptist Hospital, and it was, in their words, the most painstakingly complete autopsy they had ever done. Item: ABC News has learned that no immediate discovery was made of any disease or injury which could have caused Elvis's death. His heart was indeed enlarged and muscular, and there was significant blockage of the arteries. But according to 2 doctors present at the autopsy, serious heart disease was still years away for Elvis Presley. The doctors therefore decided they would tell the waiting world that Elvis had died from, quote, unknown causes, and that the investigation was continuing. But apparently acting on his own initiative, the county medical examiner, Dr. Jerry T. Francisco, who had been present at the autopsy, went before the cameras and told a much different story. Without the advice or consent from the doctors from Baptist Hospital, who had actually performed the autopsy, Dr. Francisco told the waiting world that Elvis Presley had died of a heart attack.
Results of the autopsy are that the cause of death is a cardiac arrhythmia due to undetermined causes. There are several cardiovascular diseases that are known to be present. One is a mild degree of hypertension that had been under treatment for some time, and that there was hardening of the arteries, the coronary arteries of the heart, known as coronary atherosclerosis.
To the millions of people who knew the man and his music and loved it, people like me, Dr. Francisco's announcement brought almost a sigh of relief. Elvis Presley was dead, but while that was terrible, at least he had died of natural causes. At least the king had not followed in the melancholy rock and roll tradition of Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, and all the others. But did Elvis really die of a heart attack? Sometimes the truth hurts. Our investigation indicates he did not. We'll tell you.
So to be clear, you know, I still think that there's a good possibility Elvis did die from some sort of a heart attack and not from, you know, an overdose, because there's been enough research on this to know, yeah, there was some sort of cover-up, but it doesn't mean that Elvis, you know, passed away from that. Like he had so many health issues, and I'm not trying to, let's say, I mean, of course, we're always trying to protect his legacy, but I'm also a realist. We know Elvis had an issue with taking too many prescription medicines, partially because nothing was working. The doctors weren't really taking care of his health issues because they didn't know a lot of the stuff, the TBI, traumatic brain injury that he had, and how that can affect you. And I mean, just so many years of taking something you didn't know back then the long-term effects. And of course, you had, you know, cortisone, you know, shots that caused all the puffiness and swelling from 73, 74 on. Your body can be affected permanently, and we didn't have that information back then that we do now.
The real story of how and why he died after this.
Shocked and saddened millions of Elvis fans. The public was told that his death was caused by heart attack. But almost from the moment he died, rumors began spreading about Elvis Presley's problems with drugs and about what really might have killed him. Geraldo Rivera has completed an extensive investigation of the death of Elvis Presley and the mystery surrounding it. Geraldo, it seems that you may have located the key to the mystery.
The key to the mystery is the Shelby County medical examiner, Dr. Jerry T. Francisco, and if we had his help, we could have cracked this case months ago, but we did not. He consistently refused to be interviewed by us. Claiming that the information is confidential, he has also refused to make public the autopsy results that would lay to rest once and forever the controversy over how and why Elvis Presley died. In order to obtain those results, we filed a lawsuit against Dr. Francisco, the medical examiner. Our motives are simple. Based on the evidence you're about to see, we believe there's been a cover-up. Item. As far as we can determine, no member of the staff of Baptist Hospital, including Dr. Eric Muirhead, the internationally known pathologist who headed the autopsy team, has ever agreed with Dr. Francisco, the medical examiner's conclusions. They have never said that Elvis died of natural causes. Maurice Elliott, spokesman for Baptist Hospital.
We never confirmed them, and we were not able to disagree with them either because of the fact that we are required to maintain the confidentiality of these records as a private patient as they now stand.
Leading inevitably, Mr. Elliott, to speculation that the staff of Baptist Hospital arrived at a different conclusion than the staff of the medical examiner's office.
Well, yes, obviously that speculation does exist, but there's just no way we can comment on it or put it to rest, really, and still maintain our obligation to respect the confidentiality or to maintain the confidentiality of the information.
But there is one doctor who was present at the autopsy who did consent to talk with us on the record. His name is Noel Florendo, and he was an assistant to Dr. Muirhead. Dr. Florendo was called in on the autopsy because he's an expert in the use of the electron microscope. Working now at another hospital in Memphis, Dr. Florendo had the courage to tell us what really happened in the autopsy room. Remember, Dr. Francisco is the Shelby County medical examiner who announced Elvis had died of a heart attack, but Dr. Muirhead is the man who actually supervised the autopsy. Dr. Florendo, in your medical judgment, was there any evidence that Elvis Presley died of a heart attack?
From what I saw grossly and from what my limited judgment was at that particular time, there was no gross evidence of a heart attack.
There was no gross evidence of a heart attack?
No gross evidence of a heart attack.
Were you surprised by Dr. Francisco's announcement that he had died of cardiac arrhythmia?
Personally, yes, I was surprised.
What is cardiac arrhythmia?
Cardiac arrhythmia, best explained, is an irregularity in the heartbeat sufficiently irregular enough to cause death.
And in Elvis Presley's case?
I could not find any morphological evidence of that, and indeed, I do not think there is any morphological evidence grossly to substantiate cardiac arrhythmia.
So in your opinion, he did not die of a heart attack?
In my opinion, I did not see any evidence of a heart attack morphologically.
Morphologically meaning?
Meaning there was no gross evidence of a heart attack.
I understand that you agree with Dr. Muirhead's conclusions.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Muirhead's conclusions.
And those conclusions being?
Polypharmacy.
That Elvis Presley died of the interaction of several drugs.
Most probably, yes.
Despite the contention by many officials in Memphis that Elvis Presley died of, quote, natural causes, that contention is disputed by scientific evidence uncovered here at the Bioscience Laboratories in Los Angeles. Bioscience was one of the 3 outside laboratories called in to help analyze the Presley autopsy. Their findings are depressing. According to those findings, at the time of his death, Elvis Presley was apparently abusing many different drugs. Bioscience was called in because it has some of the most advanced and sophisticated equipment available anywhere in the country. For almost 2 months, its technicians carefully analyzed the tissue samples for the autopsy being prepared in Memphis. ABC News obtained a copy of the Bioscience test results. The data revealed the following narcotic drugs in the body of Elvis Aaron Presley: codeine, morphine, methaqualone, also known as Quaaludes, Valium, Valmid, Placidil, Nembutal, phenobarbital, pentobarbital, and butabarbital. All of them are so-called downers, central nervous system depressants. Usually taken to bring on relaxation and sleep, the drugs are often abused. Several are addictive. The list of drugs found in News has learned that shortly after Elvis's body was brought here to Baptist Memorial Hospital, the contents of his stomach were pumped out. And although the contents of the stomach are generally considered of vital importance in pinpointing the cause of death, they were destroyed in this case without ever having been analyzed.
Now, of course, this was probably at the urging of Colonel Tom Parker, as well as maybe somebody that was there at the hospital that wanted to make sure that Elvis wasn't thought of in a negative light, because all the great that Elvis did, all the good that Elvis did during his lifetime, there's plenty of people that just really wanted to destroy him, that didn't like him, that wanted to, and you know, Geraldo Rivera, in my opinion, is one of those. So it's kind of the crazy that he's so well thought of as a journalist when he really isn't. He was a hack that wanted to have the most sensational. That's my opinion. You know, maybe he wasn't a hack. Maybe he was a talented guy, but he certainly took a negative angle towards Elvis way too much.
Given all we know now about Elvis Presley's drug abuse problem, it's reasonable to assume that vital evidence was therefore destroyed. Evidence of whatever drugs Elvis had taken shortly before he died. What we've so far been unable to determine is whether that evidence was destroyed intentionally or merely through neglect. In October of 1977, 2 months after Elvis was found dead in his bathroom at Graceland, word of the drugs found began leaking to the newspapers in Memphis. To quiet the spreading rumors, Dr. Jerry T. Francisco held another press conference.
Shelby County Medical Examiner Dr. Jerry Francisco told reporters that the conclusion of his 2-month autopsy into the death of Elvis Presley is that the entertainer died of a heart attack and that drugs were not a contributing factor.
The cause of death has been ascribed to hypertensive heart disease and coronary artery heart disease as a contributory factor.
Dr. Raymond Kelly of Bioscience.
When we undertake to do this sort of analysis, we do it in the most thorough and conclusive way as we possibly can. And we don't rush ourselves. We utilize every analytical technique we have available, and that includes some of the most sophisticated methods anywhere in the country.
What about in a case with medical legal implications?
We exercise more care in that sort of analysis than anything else that we do, because it has potential legal significance.
How about the Elvis Presley case, specifically? How was that treated here?
Well, that's the most important medical legal case we've ever had. And so we, if anything, exercised even more care in the analysis of those specimens than we would normally exercise.
How do you respond, then, to the criticism by Dr. Francisco and others that the results found here at Bioscience could be discounted?
That doesn't seem reasonable to me at all. I think that a person making that statement just couldn't be familiar with the way that we approach these kind of samples.
As you know, Doctor, we have obtained by independent means a chart, a table that lists the drugs that were present in Mr. Presley's body at the time of death. How sure are you that those numbers accurately represent the levels found in Mr. Presley's body at the time of death?
I'm sure beyond a reasonable doubt.
The findings of Bioscience were confirmed and amplified by both the other outside laboratories, the Orange County Coroner's Office and the University of Utah Center for Human Toxicology. After we verified the authenticity of the report, we took the raw data to a Los Angeles doctor, Matthew Ellenhorn. We asked him to analyze and review the data thoroughly. Ellenhorn's an expert in medical malpractice and a certified toxicologist. We asked him for the real cause of death.
Cause of death was an overdose of codeine and an overdose of methaqualone or Quaalude. And that was contributed to by a presence in the bloodstream which indicated that the patient had taken, probably within the previous 24 hours, at least 5 additional drugs known to produce depression of the central nervous system, of depression of the brain.
To be certain, we asked for a second expert opinion. We provided the data to Dr. Cyril Wecht, the coroner for Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, for analysis. Dr. Wecht is one of the foremost medical examiners in the entire country.
I believe that Mr. Presley died as a result of a combined drug effect. Various drugs, all of which are known to be central nervous system depressants, collectively cause the heart and lung to be depressed. The brain controls the activities of the heart and lung involuntarily. And when the brain is depressed by multiple drugs, such as happened in this case, in my opinion, the heart and lungs will not function properly.
What drugs specifically are we referring to, Doctor?
There were several drugs involved here. The principal offender in this case was codeine, which is a pain reliever, but which is known to have a CNS depressant effect. Other drugs included Valium, a tranquilizer, Valmid, a sedative, Placidil, a sedative, phenobarbital, a sedative, and butabarbital, a sedative. It's incredible, really, that all these drugs should have been given to the patient simultaneously. There was one other drug involved, methaqualone, which is a tranquilizer.
Knowing now about the laundry list of drugs, our investigative team decided to track down some of the people who knew Elvis best. David Stanley was his stepbrother. David also worked at Graceland as a security man and personal aide to Elvis.
Listen to me, David. This is very important. You personally witnessed Elvis Presley abusing drugs on many, many occasions, almost daily.
3 times a week. I'd work a day, Ricky'd work a day, 2 other guys would work.
So obviously, y'all know that I talk with Billy Stanley quite often. I've had some conversations with him on the channel, and I've talked to him off the channel. Look, Billy loves his brothers. He loved his mom. You know, he doesn't agree with everything his brothers have said. Of course, Ricky, you know, bless his heart, is gone to, you know, R.I.P., rest in peace. David is still alive. David is still, I believe, working out at the Westgate. He's got some sort of a muscle disease. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of Elvis fans don't like David, is because they felt like he shouldn't have said some of the things he said, and he said even more terrible things, kind of. That being said, I just wanted to point out that this is one of the reasons why David is not liked in the Elvis community.
That's about 2 to 3 times a week.
But every time you were on duty?
Every time.
Every single
Every day. Every day. Last 2 years of Elvis's life, it was every day.
What would Elvis do if he didn't get the drugs he wanted?
He'd get upset sometimes. We were in Vegas one time, and like we were there for like 8 weeks, you know, and Elvis was getting his drugs, but it got to a point to where his doctor wanted to shut him off in Vegas. And we couldn't reach the doctor anymore. So he jumped up on the table one day and he pulled out his .45 and he says, "I'll buy a goddamn drugstore if I have to." He says, "I'm gonna get what I want." He says, "You people better realize that either you're with me or against me. Either you take it or I'll buy your plane ticket home."
Why didn't you stop him?
I tried on different occasions to stop Elvis. When I saw him take something that I thought he shouldn't be taking, or taking too much of something. And on the different times he would say, I don't understand. But he would, you know, he would say, "I need it," which I don't understand. And when I first started dating Elvis, I just turned 20 at the time, and no one ever told me anything about what to expect, how the group was, or anything like that. I had to learn everything on my own. And the people that had been around Elvis for all these years, when I saw Elvis take something, or which was mainly before he would go to sleep, I thought to myself, well, it must not really be harmful if it's prescribed. And if these people over the years, if Elvis is still doing it, then it must not really be very harmful for him.
Elvis had a serious drug problem. It was very serious. The reason I can say is because I used to have a drug problem, we've discussed. And I would say it was very, very bad, and we knew if it continued, that something like this would happen. We knew it would just be a matter of time.
Rick Stanley, another of Elvis's stepbrothers, was working at Graceland on the night Elvis died. Were you the person who filled the prescription at Baptist Memorial?
Yes, I was.
What was it?
It was Dilaudid.
Dilaudid, a very powerful morphine-type drug.
Class A narcotic.
Then what did you do with it?
Well, I went back to Elvis's house, went upstairs, and gave it to him. Talked with him for a moment and left.
Who signed that prescription?
Dr. Nicopoulos.
What was in the second packet that you brought upstairs?
In the second packet were varieties of sleeping pills, Quaalude, some barbiturates, Seconal, Tuinals, Amitol, Valium, and a couple of Demerol tabs.
Approximately how many pills?
6 to 8 pills.
Was that common?
Yes, it was.
Did it happen every night that you were on duty?
Oh, yeah. Every night I was on duty. Elvis couldn't sleep without it.
W.S. Nash was the pharmacist on...
Elvis always had terrible insomnia, and for somebody as talented and different as him, with as much life as he lived, as well as enough stress and responsibilities to take the life of any man that's younger, I mean, he unfortunately is somebody that needed something to go to sleep, and then when you take something like that, you need something to get up. It's a vicious cycle. This is why I always tell people that I feel like I'm blessed that I didn't become super famous, that I just had a level of success that made me feel kind of good about my talent, and still enabled me and my wife, who's very extremely talented, to still have a good life, a life that we can be. We don't have to be up and down and up and down, and in a sense owned by a group or owned by a person that financially invested in us. So Elvis, it just doesn't get talked about enough that Elvis had more stress and responsibility on him than anybody that ever alive in this earth, you know, besides the Lord, of course.
Duty when Rick went to get the prescription filled at the Baptist Hospital Pharmacy. It was for Dilaudid, a powerful morphine-based narcotic. Dilaudid is a painkiller, but because the drug is so powerful and addictive, it's usually prescribed only in the most severe cases. And most certainly Elvis, who had had only 2 teeth filled that night, had no real medical need for the drug. Mr. Nash, the druggist, is now retired and living in Kentucky, but he's still pained by the memory of Elvis's last prescription.
Pictured myself as the person dispensing the fatal dose that killed him, even though that the possibility is that had that been the only drug he had taken, it probably wouldn't have killed him. But in combination with others, I'm almost sure it did.
As indeed it did. At this point in the story, there's something very important to be added. Elvis Presley was certainly no street addict. The drugs which destroyed his world and which finally killed him were all prescription medicine. He got the codeine.
Now I've got to commend Geraldo for saying that, because it's true, and I'm glad that he did put that out there in this special. I mean, I wasn't around to see it. I guess I was just too young. I never saw it as a child, but you know, well, I need to get some chapstick. I'm going to be out golfing in the heat today, and I am so I had to put the phone down for a second. All right, so chapped. Anyways, I do appreciate Geraldo saying that.
From his dentist, the morphine and the Quaaludes from his doctor. The drugs were all legal medicine prescribed by licensed doctors and dentists. That last prescription, for instance, the morphine, was written by a man named Dr. George Nicopoulos. Dr. Nick, as he was called at Graceland, had been a close friend and a member of Elvis's so-called Memphis Mafia since 1966. I'll have a lot to say about Dr. Nick and about some of the other doctors who wrote some of the other prescriptions when 2020 returns after this. We'll be meeting the licensed doctors who provided Elvis with the legal medicine that killed him, the doctors, and the role they played in the bizarre life and unnecessary death of Elvis Presley, when 2020 continues in a moment.
Tonight, 2020 is presenting the results of an investigation by Geraldo Rivera into the death of Elvis Presley. We've established that Elvis Presley was dependent on drugs prescribed by his own doctors who were supposed to help him.
The doctors that wrote the prescriptions, in my opinion, contributed 70% of his early demise. I don't think anybody should die at 42.
John O'Grady is a retired police officer who once headed the narcotics detail of the Los Angeles Police Department. Now a private detective, O'Grady frequently worked for Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, finding out who was supplying his son with drugs. There were several investigations between 1969 and 75, concerned primarily with Elvis's life on the West Coast.
In your opinion, should his attending physicians have noticed the fact that he was abusing these drugs?
I enjoyed seeing that snippet of John O'Grady. We know that Elvis did trust John. I know that John had said that he tried to get Priscilla to help get Elvis into some sort of a facility, as well as others, and Elvis wouldn't listen, or he didn't want to listen to Priscilla. It's probably a miscalculation. John probably should have reached out to Lucy Barbin, who it said that John is the one that put Lucy on a list to always be able to get through when she called. And John is the one that did the private investigating, of course, for a number of things, including the false claim that Elvis had a child with another woman in 1970, I believe it was, or 71 or 69. Let's continue.
He'd either have to be a retarded alligator not to notice that, or a totally incompetent medical doctor.
In your opinion, did the doctors therefore contribute to Elvis Presley's death? Was Elvis Presley murdered, in a sense?
I think anyone that's abandoned and given something that causes their death for whatever reason is murder. Now, I'm not saying first degree, premeditated, but it's a degree of murder. It's negligence. There's negligent homicide. It could be the same thing. If you go to a bar and the bartender serves you 25 drinks in a row and you die there, somebody's guilty of your death. That's negligent homicide, which is another term is murder.
And you think the parallel to the Elvis Presley case is
very similar, except the bartender is a professional bartender, the doctor's a professional physician.
Jack Kelly, who once headed the Los Angeles office of the Drug Enforcement Administration, is now a private detective who worked with John O'Grady on the Elvis investigations.
He could get whatever he wanted anytime he wanted it. Most of them that I found were only too anxious to give it to him.
How so? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, for a variety of reasons. For one thing, there's doctors who, through carelessness or irresponsibility, will get their patients addicted. And there's doctors who do it for monetary gain. And there are doctors, dentists, who do it because they're starstruck. You find that particularly out here in Hollywood. And unfortunately, Elvis was a victim of all three.
What about Max Shapiro?
Max Shapiro was a source of supply for Elvis, unquestionably.
You're sure of that?
Yes, I'm positive of it.
Dr. Max Shapiro, who asks everyone to call him Dr. Max, is at the very least a highly unusual dentist. Aside from the fact that he makes frequent house calls, the dentist also has the reputation in Hollywood of being a Dr. Feelgood, who makes his patients feel good by prescribing them narcotics, whether or not there's a medical need for the drugs.
How would you respond to being called a Dr. Feelgood?
Dr. Painless would be all right. But if I worked on a patient, they would never have pain. That was one of my very, very strong attitudes. I myself am afraid of pain. And I understand what a patient goes through. I've been lied to by doctors. They told me things wouldn't hurt. And they treated me, and it did hurt.
Did you make sure that Elvis suffered no pain?
Yes, of course. As all patients.
I'm actually going to give you a view of the beautiful Tennessee countryside instead of turn the camera on me. That way I'm not tempted to look at the camera. And you get a beautiful view. So, what do y'all think about that section? Okay? There's a lot of truth in that section, of course. And gosh, I do feel like the doctors thought. A lot of the doctors did really think that they were helping Elvis. And, you know, when you're chasing after mystery pains and ailments, and we know now that sometimes these prescription medications can cause their own pains. You know, I know some of them really highly benefited from being Elvis's doctors. They were given cars and jewelry and all that stuff. But I do feel like, for the most part, I think that the doctors were just trying to figure it out and keep Elvis going. And they probably thought, gosh, this is a smart guy too. And Elvis thought he knew the medications he could take. And like I said, I still don't think it was an overdose per se. I mean, I could be wrong, of course. But I do believe that all those prescription pills contributed to why he passed away that night.
Outside the office after the interview, we decided to ask Dr. Max for just a quick glance inside the metal case he always carries with him on his so-called house calls. You wouldn't let me peek inside there, would you?
No, because I have narcotics in there now and things. So I don't like to have it open and displayed. I don't like people even know where I keep things because I've been robbed.
But there are narcotics in there now.
Yes, there are narcotics in here now.
We did manage an earlier look inside Dr. Shapiro's case. It contained between 15 and 20 bottles of various narcotic drugs.
All right, that's going to conclude today's episode of it. We're going to do part 2 tomorrow. I just find it interesting to look back at some of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? All right, TCP TLC, this is Joe Cinderella's Photos. Till next time.